Welcome, dear students. Today we will be looking at a very interesting poem taken from Unit 4 of your English Bal Bharati textbook, that is The VIII, written by Guy Bose. The following images used in this video are taken from different internet websites. Well, students, now let us learn a little more about this author. Guy Bose was born in 1897 in Bickley, Greater London, in England. He was a Shakespearean scholar as well as a headmaster at Sloane Grammar School. He remained the headmaster of that school between the year 1929 to 1961, as well as he was the author of Modern English Prose, a Punch anthology, an English book of light verse, prose of yesterday, etc. He achieved wide recognition for his remarkable production of schoolboys in Shakespeare's play, and he died in the year 1966. Now, students, let us look at the poem. A vet or a veterinarian means a person who treats the disease or injuries of animals. It basically means a doctor for the animals. To be a successful and competent vet needs knowledge exceedingly wide. For each of the patients he is likely to get possesses a different insight. He must know why the cat is refusing her milk, why the dog is not eating his bone, why the coat of the horse is not shining like silk, why the parrot does nothing but groan, why the ducks and the chickens are failing to lay, why so faint the canary bird sings. And if he is called to the zoo, he must say an incredible number of things. If the lion's caught a cold, if the zebra's getting old, if the centipede has trouble with his feet, if the hippo's feeling ill, if the bison's got a chill, if the Arctic fox is suffering from heat, if some virulent disease has attacked the chimpanzees, if the tortoise hasn't stirred for several years, if the bear's too full of buns, if the cobra eats her sons, if the panther has a wife who chews his ears, if the giraffes have had a tiff and their necks are feeling stiff, if hyenas will not laugh at keepers' jokes, if the monkey's pinched his tail, if the rhino's looking pale, if the elephant eats paper bags and chokes, if the camel hurts his hump, if the kangaroo won't jump, if the crocodile turns cannibal and bites, they run away and get that omniscient the vet and expect him to put everything to rights. Profoundly, I pity the vet who must learn such a very great deal for his pay. My son, I advise you most strongly to earn your living an easier way. Don't attempt to attend the zoological crowd. A far more advisable plan is to call yourself doctor and so be allowed to treat the illnesses of man. Now, students, let us begin by understanding the poem each stanza wise. The first stanza speaks about to be a successful and competent vet needs knowledge exceedingly wide. For each of the patients he's likely to get possesses a different insight. As discussed before, a vet is a doctor for animals and birds. Competent means having very good knowledge and ability. Exceedingly means very much. And a different insight means every animal has different types of sizes of organs inside the body. This is a witty and light-hearted poem. The poet begins by saying that if one wants to be a successful and capable veterinarian or vet, one needs to have extremely wide knowledge or good knowledge, for each patient that the vet gets has different types and sizes of organs in his or her body. The second stanza says he must know why the cat is refusing her milk, why the dog is not eating his bone, why the coat of the horse is not shining like silk, why the parrot does nothing but groan. Groan basically means a sound of pain. The vet has to know why the cat refuses to drink milk or the dog refuses to eat his bone. He must know why the coat of the horse is not shining silkily, or why the parrot does nothing else but groan or is in pain. Why the ducks and the chickens are failing to lay, why so faint the canary bird sings, and if he is called to the zoo he must say an incredible number of things. Incredible means unbelievable. He must know why the ducks and the hens are not laying eggs, and why the canary bird sings so softly. If he is called to the zoo, he has a lot of patience and he has unbelievable number of things that needs to be said. Now students, let's move to the fourth stanza of the poem. If the lion's caught a cold, if the zebra's getting old, if the centipede has trouble with his feet, if the hippo's feeling ill, if the bison's got a chill, if the Arctic fox is suffering from heat. Now here we have if the lion's got a cold or if the zebra's getting old, it's all said in a funny way. Okay, it is not said in a serious tone. A centipede is a small, long, thin creature with many legs, a type of an insect. And a bison is basically a type of animal. It's an American buffalo. So let's see what the poet is trying to tell us. He's trying to tell us that even if the lion gets a cold, or if the zebra is having old age problems, or if the centipede cannot move his feet anymore, or the hippopotamus all of a sudden is feeling ill, and if the bison is feeling chilled or cold, or the Arctic fox is suffering from the heat, then also the vet is called. Moving on to the fifth stanza, if some virulent disease has attacked the chimpanzees, if the tortoise hasn't stirred for several years, if the bear's too full of buns, if the cobra eats her sons, if the panther has a wife who chews his ears. Now here again the poet is trying to tell us that if there is some deadly disease or virus that has spread among the chimpanzees, or if the tortoise hasn't moved for several years. So here stirred basically means moved. Okay, and if the bear has eaten too many buns, or the cobra has eaten her own babies, or the female panther chews the ears of a mate, then also one calls the vet. Moving on to the sixth stanza, if the giraffes have had a tiff and their necks are feeling stiff, If hyenas will not laugh at keeper's jokes, if the monkeys pinched his tails, if the rhino's looking pale. Now here, if the giraffes have had a tiff, basically means if a giraffes have had a quarrel, and keeper's jokes is basically referred to the zookeeper. So the poet is telling us like if the giraffes have had a quarrel and now have stiff necks because of that, or if the hyenas will not laugh when the zookeeper cracks the jokes, or what if the monkey has pinched his own tail, or the rhinoceros is looking pale, then also one calls the vet. Let us now look at the seventh stanza of the poem. If the elephant eats paper bags and chokes, if the camel hurts his hump, if the kangaroo won't jump, if the crocodile turns cannibal and bites, they run away and get that omniscient the vet and expect him to put everything to rights. Cannibal basically means one who eats human flesh, and omniscient is one who knows all and everything. So the poet is trying to tell us that what if the elephant has eaten paper bag and starts choking? Choking basically here he can't breathe anymore. Or if the camel has hurt his hump and the kangaroo is not jumping, or if the crocodile turns into a man-eating monster and starts biting people and eating people, the people at the zoo will run away and call the vet, who's expected to know everything and who's expected to cure everything. The eighth stanza says, profoundly, I pity the vet who must learn such a very great deal for his pay. My son, I advise you most strongly to earn your living an easier way. Now here the poet is trying to say firstly profoundly, meaning very greatly or deeply. The poet is saying that he pities the vet, okay, who has to learn so much, but the pay that he gets is very less. So the poet strongly is advising the reader to earn his living in an easier way. The ninth stanza. Don't attempt to attend the zoological crowd. A far more advisable plan is to call yourself doctor and so be allowed to treat the illnesses of man. Now the poet is here saying that his advice is not to attempt to attend to animals. He says, why don't you call yourself a doctor, become a doctor and attend to the illnesses of human beings instead than becoming a vet. Well, students, moving on to the next part of the poem, that is looking at the poetic devices. The first poetic device we are going to talk about is the rhyme scheme of the poem. The poem has a rhyme scheme, but it is not the same throughout the poem. In the stanzas 1, 2, 3 and the last two stanzas, that is stanza 8 and stanza 9, the rhyme scheme is AB, AB. In stanza 4 and stanza 5, the rhyme scheme of the poem is AA, B, C, C, B. In stanza 6, the rhyme scheme is AA, B, C, C. And in stanza 7, the rhyme scheme is A, B, B, C, D, D, C. I hope you've understood the rhyme scheme of the poem. Well, students, moving on to the next part of the poem is the figures of speech. As you read the entire poem, you must have realized there are several figures of speech used in the poem. Some of the figures of speech that we are going to look at is personification, simile, hyperbole, onomatopoeia, and alliteration. Starting off with the first type of figures of speech, that is simile. simile is a direct comparison of one thing with another thing of a different kind, used to make a description more emphatic or vivid, which also means lively. Example taken from the poem is, the coat of the horse is not shining like silk. Well, here the figures of speech used here is simile, like silk, comparing the coat of the horse with silk, but it doesn't literally means the coat is silk. The second type of figures of speech we are going to look at is personification, the attribution of a personal nature or human characteristic given to something that is non-human, or the representation of an abstract quality in human form. For example, if hyenas will not laugh at the keeper's jokes. Now here the hyenas don't actually laugh, okay? So they seem to like having a smiling face. Smiling is again a human quality. Here it means that there is some problem with the hyena's health. Okay, it is referred to as that in the poem. The next type of figures of speech that we are going to look at is alliteration. Alliteration is basically the repetition of the same sound or letter at the beginning of words in a phrase. For example, if the camel hurts his humps, as you can see, hurts his humps it begins with the alphabet H. And the second example is if the bear is too full of buns. Again, the alphabet B is repeated in two different words. The second type again of figures of speech we are going to look at is hyperbole. It is an exaggerated statement or claim that is not meant to be taken literally on its actual sense. If the tortoise hasn't stirred for several years, it's an exaggerated statement. How can a tortoise not move for many years? Or if the bear is too full of buns. Again, full of buns doesn't literally mean that the bear has buns all over his body. It means that the bear is attacked by some disease or is suffering through some disease. The last type of figures of speech we are going to look at is onomatopoeia. It basically means it includes words which evoke the actual sound of the thing they refer to or describe. For example, the boom of a firework exploding, or tick-tock of a clock, etc. Examples taken from the poem are, why the parrot does nothing but groan. Second example, if the elephant eats paper bags and chokes. Here we have chokes and groan referring to the sound. Well, students, now let's move to the activity part and see if you can answer these questions. Why does the poet call the vet omniscient? Well, students, you are right. The poet calls the vet omniscient because he has to know everything about all the animals. Their body parts are different. They live in different parts of the world. They are used to different climates. Their food habits are different. If the vet does not have knowledge about all this, he will not do justice to the animals and to his profession. Moving on to the second question. What is the poet's advice to you? Do you think he means it? Well, the poet advises us to earn our living in an easier way. He tells us not to attend to the zoological crowd or the animal kingdom, but to treat the illnesses of man, since this is easily done. I am sure the poet does not mean what he says. The fact that he knows so much of animals shows us that he loves animals. The poet has high regards for vets because a vet must have so much knowledge about different animals. This is not really advice. The poet is just showing us the importance of animal doctors. Moving on to the third question. Write 4 reasons why animals in a zoo suffer more than those who live free in the world. Students, I think you can answer these very well. The animals that live in the zoo feel caged. The zoo is an artificial habitat or home for those wild animals. They are used to natural habitat for their wildlife. Animals, specifically wild ones, are used to hunting and killing for their own food. In the zoo, they are fed with food. In the zoo, again, the animals get disturbed with the noise of the spectator or audience, especially children. The animals cannot move about freely in the zoo. Out in the open, they can move wherever they wish. Students, I hope you have understood what is the difference between the zoo animals and the animals that roam freely in the forest. Is the poet really discouraging the youth from becoming vets? Explain your response. Yes, you know the answer. I am sure that the poet is not trying to discourage the youth from becoming vets. In fact, he is trying to show us how much the vet must learn and know before he treats his patients. The poet is in fact praising the vet, and even he uses the word omniscient when he refers to the vet. This word itself tells us that the vet has to have very good knowledge and ability, since every animal, bird or reptile have got different sizes of organs in them. Thank you, students, and hope you enjoyed this video.